Does the Telstra TV 3 deserve a spot in your lounge room?
And is it worth getting excited about 8K TV?
Vertical Hold is proudly sponsored by NetComm, taking Australian technology to the global market.
Welcome to Vertical Hold, Behind the Tech News, where we talk to Australia's leading technology journalists to get the stories behind the news of the week. I'm Alex Kidman, and I'm joined, as always, by Adam Turner, a man who swears blind he's not responsible for today's Facebook outage. But if that's true, Adam, why do you own that frighteningly realistic Mark Zuckerberg mask?
I find that when I wear it, people give me a very wide berth on public transport.
I can totally see why you own one, and now I want one too. While Adam is annoying people on public transport, we're also joined, once again, by Australian IT tech reporter Chris Griffith. Chris, welcome back to the show. How did you survive the great Facebook outage?
I just started writing about it on other medium. That kept my mind off it and away from it. But I noticed the big thunderstorms in Sydney tonight. Obviously, the gods are a bit angry about it all.
One of the benefits, I guess, of being a tech journo is when there's a tech problem, you get to write about it. We'll be getting onto that shortly, as well as talking about Telstra's new Telstra TV 3 streaming box and the imminent arrival of 8K TVs in Australia. But first, it's time to go over to the tech news desk. Adam, what's happening in tech?
In typical Apple style, Apple has announced that it's going to announce something on March 25. Most likely, its long-awaited video streaming service to rival the likes of Netflix. Apple struck a number of high-profile content deals last year and hired several Hollywood studio execs. Plus, it plans to spend more than $1 billion on original content. Meanwhile, iTunes is coming to Samsung televisions this year, amid rumours that Apple might unveil a low-cost Chromecast-style HDMI dongle for streaming video to televisions rather than requiring viewers to buy the much more expensive Apple TV set-top box.
It's not been a good week for the giants of the internet world, with both Google and Facebook suffering service outages. Gmail and Google Drive went down for some users globally on Wednesday, only for Facebook to shout, "Hold my beer," and then to spill it all over the servers, or maybe that's what happened, by having outages across Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and even the Oculus VR store on Thursday. Google hasn't officially said what caused its woes, and at the time of the recording, the only public comment from Facebook was that it wasn't a DDoS attack, a statement it made by Twitter because, well, Facebook was down.
Arch-rival home entertainment giants Samsung and LG are talking up 8K as they start to reveal their plans for Australia. Samsung will be first to market with its 65-inch 8K QLED, which will set you back $10,000. To sweeten the deal, Samsung will even throw in a free Galaxy 10s Plus. Meanwhile, LG's been more tight-lipped, revealing that it will offer an 88-inch 8K OLED, but it won't arrive on Australian shelves until the second half of the year.
Got a Pixel phone? You can now update to the first public beta of Android Q right now by enrolling your device, although whether that's wise is a bit of an open question. Android Q is set to include new privacy-centric features, easier content sharing, and support for foldable Android devices. But the full-fat final version won't actually appear for all Pixel devices and then eventually other Android handsets until much later in the year, probably around the time frame when we see the Pixel 4 phones.
So, Alex, Facebook and Google had a very bad week. Talk us through it. What was the fallout? What do we think caused it?
Well, look, clearly they just weren't paying their broadband bills. It's obvious in hindsight. They're clearly strapped for cash, for server space. Or something else went wrong. And part of the problem with this story is that they really haven't said much. Google really hasn't said anything at all about its outage. Facebook was relatively quick when its outages started to say via Twitter that it wasn't a distributed denial of service attack, but they haven't really said anything else about what it was. And it was an odd one for Facebook because it wasn't like Facebook, the website was down and nobody could, update what they were having for lunch that day. It was bits of Facebook and bits of Instagram and bits of WhatsApp, but it depended on where you were on the planet and what kind of service you were trying to actually use. So for myself, for example, for Facebook over the course of the day, I went from, yeah, everything is fine to I can't publish updates to I can publish updates but can't like stuff. At the time of recording, it seems to be back up and running, but I'm still seeing reports from other people that they can't access it all. Chris, you mentioned that you wrote lots of stories on this. Did you dig up any dirt on what had happened?
Yes, I went out of. I thought the story that mattered was to try and see if we can get some insights into what actually happened, and we ended up talking to a professor who's in uh, of basically of sort of internet networking at University of Sydney, and his view, and he had a fairly strong view about this, and it's not corroborated. We haven't heard from Facebook yet, but he believes it's the corruption of the Border Gateway Protocol, the BGP routing tables, because it goes a bit like this: that it's unlikely to be that your data's been deleted because Facebook has multiple copies of your data at different data centers around the world. It's talked about that in the past. And so the idea is if there was a war or a big natural disaster where one of these data centers is located, then of course your data is secure elsewhere on the planet. Um, but his view is because of the size of it, and the other thing we thought first, but is could it be some horrible internal upgrade of Facebook that had caused this? But of course, it was multiple platforms: Facebook, Instagram, as you said, and WhatsApp and Messenger. So his view is that it was actually more a corruption of the IP routing tables. And he's argued this in a piece we wrote this afternoon. So basically, it's a bit like imagine if you had all the Australian postcodes and you kind of deleted any reference to what suburbs they were in. And that was the basis on which the post office actually was trying to deliver the mail. It just it just doesn't know where to send it. And in this case, it just doesn't know where the packets could go. And he postulates that it could be a corruption, but it could be deliberate as well. I mean, either possibility is there. But he thinks that that model matches pretty well what's happened. Hopefully, we'll see some explanation from Facebook. I think they really, we really deserve to get that, as we did from, as we didn't do from Google yesterday.
So as a consumer, it's just a bit of an inconvenience that you can't, post pictures of your lunch or whatever it is that people do on Facebook. But for businesses, this was a much bigger deal. Yes.
Absolutely. There was. I looked today at some of the ad websites lamenting that they weren't, their ads weren't being served, and the financial impact of that. And of course, a lot of businesses depend on their Facebook groups or talking to their communities on Facebook as well. It's kind of integral in so many things that an outage like this, which is like 11 hours in some parts of the world for some people, really does bring back how dependent we've become on these platforms, but Facebook in particular, particularly with the payment system and the commerce and the communities that have groups on it.
So, Alex, there's a myriad of different ways to get streaming content onto your television. Some of them more expensive than others, some of them more user friendly than others. Telstra's had a Telstra TV out, and we've just seen the third generation of it. Where does it sort of rank in terms of decent solutions for, watching streaming content on the big screen in your home?
Well, I think you and I are going to have slightly different opinions on this one because I know we've both spent a fair bit of time with the Telstra TV3 sorting out what it can and can't do.
As has Chris.
As has Chris.
Yes.
This is true. This is true. So you mentioned it's an upgrade, and it really is. I mean, visually, not much different. It's a kind of flat black box that sits near enough to your TV for the HDMI cable to reach. As with the previous Telstra TV models, it's basically built on the platform that US tech company Roku has built, but with a lot of Telstra modifications on board.
When you say modifications, you mean lockdowns?
Well, yeah, I'm being kind, but yes,
Yeah.
lockdowns. The
Yeah.
the Roku box is a lot more open in terms of apps, whereas Telstra has that. There is an app store on this device, but it's got off the top of my head, it's about 12 apps in there, and I think 8 of them are pre-installed anyway. So there's not a lot you can add to this box that isn't already there. Now that doesn't make it a, a completely awful option, because the big selling point for Telstra is they're actually balancing stuff in a way that the home few of the homegrown alternatives really do, because of the support they've got for Foxtel Now and Netflix on the same box, which essentially speaking nobody else has managed.
So, Chris, how do you think it stacks up?
I think what keeps it, I mean, we're at the age now where our smart TVs all have apps and that. So you need to have something special for us to need an extra set top box. I think in the case of Telstra, what keeps it in as a reasonable idea is the fact that they do bother to have all of the catch up services, all of the local streaming services, and without exception, they seem to be all there. Whereas even with the new TVs, I had a look at the LG TVs. Three of the catch up services aren't there at the start. You might be able to download them and add them, but they're not there. And the other thing is that you can have it's got that good integrated search where it does work to some degree. It's not perfect by any means, but you can type in the name of a movie that you're after, and it'll try and search across those various TV stations and across the streaming platforms to find where you could have it. Now, I think that is what makes Telstra TV a viable platform at the moment, simply because there may be not quite enough customization of the big global TV sets, local offerings here in the Australian market. One thing I thought was a bit comical was their voice assistant has a good sounds like a very blokey
Yeah.
Aussie guy that you can
Yeah.
say, bung on Netflix
Yeah.
is like, as if you were bunging a sausage on the barbecue. I almost thought I should go and get the Urban Dictionary out and see how good it would be in recognizing some of the slang that we had. But that was a bit of fun, and they it does sound a bit more blokey and
Yeah.
ochreish and Aussie than Alexa and Google Home.
See, I don't know that I care so much. It's cute, I'll grant it that, but I don't know that I care so much that it's blokey. I care about whether or not it works. And I found it was a little bit hit and miss as to how it interpreted me or the results that it served up, sometimes even serving up the same result multiple times within a tile for the same movie, which is not really what you want in a kind of easy box. And Chris, I hate to correct you, but you mentioned it having all the streaming services, but there's no Amazon Prime Video. It's not exactly surprising there's no Optus Sport, but there's also no 10 All Access, which I thought was an interesting omission. And
I think Chris meant
Telstra's
it's got all the free to air. It's got 7, 9, 10 ABC and SBS. It's got those five.
fair enough, fair
Yeah.
enough, but it doesn't have everything else. And
It doesn't have everything. Nothing has everything.
my big issue with this is Telstra's track record with adding stuff is not great across the lifespan of Telstra TV. And maybe they will prove me wrong with this and just start flinging the services in there as the months roll by, and that would be wonderful. But it's also limited in ways that some of the competing boxes, and I think we should perhaps pivot to those as well, because you've got a choice in this market. Some of the competing boxes, I think, do more or better than the Telstra TV, especially when it comes to casting video to it. It's got this weird thing where some apps will work if you want to cast video, but they're largely things that are already on the Telstra TV anyway. So you can cast YouTube from some devices, but not all. You can cast Netflix, even though there's a Netflix button on the remote, so I don't know why you would. But if you've got Amazon Prime Video, if you've got 10 All Access, they're Chromecast compatible, but they won't see the Telstra TV
Yeah.
at all.
I think, Chris, would you agree that probably Foxtel Now and Foxtel's KO are the two big selling points here if you're looking for specific apps?
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be content because really, I mean, it's a simple solution for people who need a simple solution. It's not that sophisticated, and it's already been a little bit made redundant by Roko's new announcement that they're going to be providing Alexa on their newer devices. So I don't know if Telstra is going to offer that, but Roku has already, in fact, 3 days after I reviewed it, there was that announcement by Roku. So um, I've always thought Telstra TV was a fairly simple device for people who wanted a simple set-top box solution, but not a particularly sophisticated one, and that's the case. In terms of what Alex said about the searches, well, I also found that if I searched particular actors, then then it would mishear that, and I'd get the completely nonsensical results of some movies there. So it wasn't all that great on that. So it's got some appeal. I think it's limited, but Telstra are claiming that they've had a lot of these in market, but I suspect that the reason for that is they've given them away to existing
Exactly. Yeah, I
customers.
saw that too. We've shipped 1.4 million of them or something, and we've given away 1.3 million. Yeah, don't read too much into those numbers.
But this raises a really important point for the Telstra TV 3 specifically, because previously they've done a lot of broadband bundles where this thing's just been part of the deal.
Yeah.
You got it kind of whether you wanted it or not. I've got relatives who have a Telstra TV 2 because it came with their broadband. They didn't particularly ask for it. Not a terrible device, and obviously for free, fine, go for it. Not a bad way to add a few services to your TV. Because of the way Telstra's rejigged its broadband contracts recently, though, the only way to get the Telstra TV is to pay for it. And you either pay, it's $216 off the top of my head outright, or you pay exactly that equivalent across 24 months. You get no discount for signing up for 2 years with them. And once you take that into consideration, the competing Vodafone box is a lot cheaper and has a digital tuner in it. You're getting up towards much more high-powered devices like the NVIDIA Shield TV, or even within cracking distance of the Apple TV. And I think under that arrangement, it becomes a lot less compelling again.
I noticed you didn't mention Foxtel's own streaming box because it's a dog. Not the IQ4, their little streaming set-top
The
box thing.
Foxtel
It's
Now
horrible.
box,
It's horrible. Yeah.
It's got issues, I think it's
It's
fair
got
to say,
big-
and they
it's
don't
got
seem to have
big
solved
issues.
too many of them.
Yeah.
But as we were discussing, in fact, on the show last week, with the split out of KO and potentially the split out of their drama packs, there's a strong suggestion that Foxtel now might be going the way of the Dodo, at which point that box probably goes the way of the Dodo too.
Yeah. I do think because Foxtel now is not on that many devices, I do think that that's the real appeal here. If you've got a Foxtel Now subscription, you're looking for an easy way, maybe not even to get into the lounge. You might have a fancy 4K TV with lots of bells and whistles in the lounge room, but you might want it for the bedroom or the rumpus room or another corner of the house where you want a quick and easy way to give your television the overhaul. But like Chris said, it's not the box for us, but I think it is the box for a lot of people. If my parents were on Telstra, I'd probably be thinking that this would be a good solution for them, especially if you got to give them over the phone tech support. This thing's pretty easy to use.
Yeah, it's a fair call, although I would suggest you could just throw a Chromecast around the back and cast your Foxtel Now. That works perfectly fine too.
True.
So, Adam, you mentioned in the news that 8K was coming, and my wallet can feel the pain already. But is it a case of lots of pain and lots of gain? Should I be getting excited about 8K?
I don't think so. Not unless you've got a shed load of money to spend and you want to play a game of Mind Sharper than yours
I am
with
a
your
tech
neighbours.
journalist. You are aware of this.
Yeah, it's a bit like the very beginnings of 4K. 4K TVs arrived in Australia in 2012, and most of us were saying the same things that we're saying about 8K now. There's nothing to watch. It's cost too much. The price will come down. And it really was about 3 years. It wasn't until Netflix brought the first 4K content to Australia and the prices have started to drop where it made sense for everyone but the early adopters to get in. I would find it pretty hard to drop 8K on a television today. I can't see where the content's going to come from. Most of us don't have the bandwidth to stream it. I don't think there'll be an 8K physical format. Chris, is this something you think's worth getting excited about yet?
Certainly not yet for those same reasons. I mean, you're going to need a big bandwidth of streaming 8K content if we have it. And I think mostly it's going to be used to upscale 1080p or 4K content. I mean, the use case for 8K is on very, very big sets, big enough that even when you stretch the 4K pixels, you don't get quite the clarity that you would.
Yeah.
I think, and the kind of point it seems to be, if you're going beyond 75 inches, that maybe you start to have a use case. I find the idea of Samsung selling a $10,000 65-inch 8K as a bit, kind of, I have to see it, but I don't know if you're going to get much benefit of that because at 65 inches, it's not that big, and 4K looks pretty good. You can
Mm.
buy 4K sets for what, one or under a grand, some brands, and certainly not much more. And I don't know how different or how crisper 8K is going to look at that resolution. But someone was describing me that if you've got like 100 inches or that, um, that you could be remotely controlling a truck and looking at the 8K TV would be kind of like looking out the windscreen in the actual resolution and quality. If again you're going to have the bandwidth, the pipeline to make that possible.
Not to mention the truck.
Not to
I'm
mention
finding
the
this whole
truck.
concept of the remotely driven truck from someone's TV just absolutely terrifying.
Well, it could happen, particularly up in the mining areas where they do have remotely driven trucks. But it is going to be very specialist, and most of us, a lot of people are struggling. I hear your pain quite often, Adam, about getting on the internet. I've been watching that uh, with quite closely, but to get up to 40 megabits per second or beyond or whatever it's going to need it, I think is going to be a stretch for most people. And it'll blot out other uses of your internet at home if you're doing that. It'll be back to like going on ADSL and sharing that with your family.
Ugh. Yeah, we've all been there.
The one space I guess 8K may come into play, and it's not there yet as well, would be gaming, where you're actually rendering stuff that's that high resolution. And there's certainly a fair amount of 4K stuff out there. So I guess it's feasible, actually, if we're going to see a physical format, it might actually be a games-related one rather than a video streaming one.
Well, then that's really going to depend on the next PlayStation or the next Xbox being 8K, isn't it? It was like Blu-ray. It was that Sony put a Blu-ray player into the PlayStation 3 that really gave it a shot in the arm. Not that I think there'll be an 8K physical format, but yeah, maybe if the PlayStation, what are we up to now for? Maybe if the PlayStation 5 was 8K and they thought they could justify it, it's going to need a shed load of grunt under the bonnet to do that. Most of the games, like with 4K originally, would just be upscaled and kind of 4K. Do you think that the gamers really care? I suppose maybe they do.
Some of them potentially will really care. I mean, NVIDIA's got a whole arm of really, really large, very, very, very low latency monitors that look gorgeous for gaming. And those are 4K panels as it is. I could see someone like an NVIDIA going, yeah, maybe this is a market we want to push that high-end gaming crowd into. But then those are the folks who are spending, multiple thousands of dollars on a graphics card. So maybe that 10 to 20 grand 8K TV would be just the thing for them. And actually, with the rise of things like esports, you could perhaps make an argument as a presentation style TV for a big event that it might make sense. And maybe that's the other space for general 8K as well, not so much in the home, but for that shopping center that really wants to stand out, or that real estate agent that wants to show off properties or whatever.
I agree with you, Alex. I think that it really is probably going to be mostly big events. We've got wonderful promises of low latency with 5G, but it's going to have to be step up to the plate if 8K is going to be used for gaming for that.
Well, that just about wraps up another episode of Vertical Hold. Now, as always, we love to get your feedback on the show, so feel free to comment via Twitter or the Vertical Hold Facebook page if it's up. Thanks again to Chris for taking time to join us.
Pleasure.
Thanks everyone for listening. We're on a big push this year to reach more people, and we'd like to make a big thanks to all the listeners who've given us a shout out on social media recently. Remember, it also really helps if you jump on iTunes or your podcasting platform of choice, leave us a review to help spread the word. Vertical Hold is proudly sponsored by NetComm, taking Australian technology to the global market. That's okay,
as Chris has said, there's one hell of an electrical storm over Sydney tonight, so I'm amazed that Chris and I both have power, let alone internet. And with that in mind, let's get this one finished up.
Let's wrap it up while we can.
Yep.